Hey everyone, welcome to the nutrition section of our Building University Crash Course 101. Today we are going to talk about why nutrition matters. So this is kind of just to give you a background on some nutritional fundamentals. We're going to talk about how this is going to affect you, your fitness journey, and your overall well-being. So first thing that we need to know is that food is fuel. I really want you to think of your body as a high performance machine. I've even heard it related to being like a car, right? And so depending on what you're putting into your body is going to be what you get out of it. If you have a car that needs that supreme gas and you're putting the eco in it, it's not going to run very well. It might actually break down, which same thing for your body, right? So we want to make sure that we are really fueling ourselves because it affects our overall well-being in every piece of our life. It helps improve our energy, enhances our gut health, maximizes our training results, supports your long-term performance both in and outside the gym, and supports recovery between workouts and helps with hormonal balance and metabolic health. So it's really everything. Next, we want to discuss why does this even matter? So there are three main topics that I really want to address, and this is because you can feel them right away. Now, we all know that food is really, really important for the long term as well, but sometimes it's a little bit hard to think that far ahead. So we want to really think about how we're going to feel the difference now. If you know anybody who's gone and just really cleaned up their diet and started eating really healthy foods, more often than not, they're going to talk about how good they felt, how quickly, and how surprised they were that their energy was so good. So that's one thing that we're talking about is sustained energy. It's going to make you feel better. Your energy is going to be more consistent. You're not going to be as tired. It helps with your digestive system. So reducing bloating, GI issues, any type of uncomfortable things. A lot of people deal with, sorry we have to say it, but constipation or even the other end of that diarrhea. I know it's a little less appealing to think about, but those are things that happen as a result of your diet not being where it should be in order to really support your body. And the last piece is enhanced performance. We know that it helps with focus. We know that it helps with your mood. And again, it helps with the hormone piece, which is a whole subject in itself. So it's really all encompassing. And it is a really interesting thing that we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. So first, I want to talk about muscle and metabolism. How does this even work? So muscle is actually your most metabolically active tissue in your body. What that means is the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn. So we'll break it down a little bit more so you can see exactly what that looks like. But essentially, you can burn an extra 7 to 10 calories a day. I've even heard up to 13 calories for every 1 pound of muscle that you put on. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot at first, but if you're like The Rock, right, who weighs 300 something pounds of basically pure muscle, I heard he eats something like 9,000 calories a day, right? And some of us are over here trying to eat 15, 1,200 or something like that, thinking that it's going to make us be in better shape. But realistically, we're holding ourselves back. So the more muscle we have, the more that fire is burning, we're feeding the furnace. And that's what we can really use to our advantage when it comes to long-term body composition and making sure that we look and feel the way that we want to. So it doesn't seem like a lot in the small run, but over time, that's really going to compound into a big difference. And the more that you're lifting, the more active you are, the better it's going to get. So that's really, really cool. So the reason that this works is I'm going to break down your total daily energy expenditure. So this is your TDEE, but basically it is the way that your body burns calories. So if you see in this top left-hand corner, we've got your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate, and that's actually what we just talked about. This is how many calories it takes for you to be alive. You could sit on a couch all day and do literally nothing, and you would burn this many calories. That's actually 60 to 70% of your TDEE, which is so cool to think that I can still burn 60 to 70% of calories by doing nothing, right? And bonus, if you have more muscle, that number gets higher, right? So that is really just giving us a really solid base number to start from. The next one is going to be on this top right-hand side, which is NEAT. This is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's anytime that you're walking, anytime that you're moving, basically anything that is not exercise, but is getting your body moving. A lot of the times we can put things in this category like taking the stairs or gardening because it's not super intense, but we are moving and using our body. So that's a really good one because it can be anywhere from 15 up to 30% of your total burning. So really the goal is to get moving throughout the day too. We'll talk a little bit about blood glucose too. It does help with your blood sugars to also move throughout the day, but this is really just getting moving, being the type of person that takes the stairs, right? As much as you can. Bottom left is the thermic effect of food. This one's kind of cute. So basically there are foods that take more calories to digest, which I know sounds a little bit weird, but it does take some energy, right, to be able to process the food throughout your body. So these ones in particular, protein is a big one, fiber, so any type of fiber-rich foods, lots of plants, and spicy foods actually demand more energy for you to be able to even digest them. So I don't know about you, but I love hot sauce. I put that shit on everything. So that's a really good way to add a little extra thermic effect of food on the foods that you're eating. And then that fiber piece, something that I'll do too is put on like some chia seeds or some flax seeds onto the food that I'm eating. And that again helps to elevate that and gives you some extra fiber for your system. So that's awesome. And then the very last one on this bottom right hand is the exercise. I'm just laughing because it's funny. Exercise activity thermogenesis. This is like working out. So we all think that working out is going to be what's making us skinny or whatever, right? Super fit and stuff like that. But it really is 5 to 10%. That means 90%, 95% of what you're doing is outside of the gym. And we're over here slaving away as if what we were going to do in the gym was going to make the world of a difference, right? And it probably won't. Now, that is not to discourage you from going to the gym. There are obviously a ton of other benefits for going to the gym, including what we were just talking about, building muscle to increase your BMR. It's just that you're not going to be able to do cardio and be able to work away all of those calories that you're eating, right? So that's something to keep in mind. It is a smaller percentage than I think a lot of people realize. And then a fact that I drew in the bottom left-hand side is that 1 pound of fat equals 3,500 calories. So we're going to talk a little bit about macronutrients and calories and all of that. But one thing that we want to keep in mind is that that's a number that we're going to revisit here or there if you are trying to do any body recomposition. Now, quick note, when I say body recomposition, typically that ends up either adding muscle or removing fat. And I think probably all of us could benefit from both of those, right? So whether you are trying to get bigger or get smaller or stay the same and maintain, that 3,500 calorie number is going to come into play a little bit. So next is our nerd alert. I love a little bit of nerdy information. Again, you do not need to remember all of this, but I do think it's a good way for you to be able to wrap your head around the basic concepts. So what we're going to talk about here is the relationship of our calories per the type of food that we're eating. So proteins have 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates are the same, also 4 calories per gram. Fat actually has 9. That is more than double protein and carbs for 1 gram of fat. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you do have a higher fat diet, more than likely you're not going to be able to eat as much volume. So that's kind of a give and take, and we'll talk about how much you're supposed to eat of each a little bit later. That's something I want you to keep in mind. And then this is one that I don't think a lot of people know. Alcohol actually has 7 calories per gram. So if you're seeing any of those like low carb, low calorie alcohols, they're probably just mostly water. So keep that in mind. Alcohol does have calories and it will add up. I was just talking to one of my other clients and I saw a stat that said something about if you were to drink like 4 bottles of wine a month, so like 1 a weekend, right? We've probably all done that. If you were to do that, you would essentially gain about 9 pounds of fat in a year just from drinking wine. And that's probably on the minimum, right? That's on the lower level. So alcohol is not free. It does have calories and it will affect you as it compounds over time. Next, we're going to go into underfueling. So this is an issue I see a lot in a lot of populations, 2 populations in particular. One is going to be athletes. Because athletes are moving so often and because we're so active and we're building muscle all the time, our body really demands a lot. And if you're not feeding it what it needs to at least maintain, you actually can't gain any muscle. It has nothing to build on top of, right? And so if you're not eating enough in general, not only are you barely surviving, but you're actually probably losing muscle, which is going to make that BMR lower, which is going to make your fat percentage higher, right? So it's all this catapulting effect that kind of compounds on top of itself. So we really want to keep that in mind. The second population I see this in a lot is people that have dieted for extended periods of time. So this is something that happens a lot when somebody maybe is trying to lose weight and they're pulling calories, thinking that they're benefiting themselves. And then they get to like that 1,000 calorie mark. And at some point your body's like, no, this isn't enough. And so your body realizes that it's not getting enough fuel. And so it actually holds on to fat. In addition, just as a little fun fact, as you are more stressed out, you have higher cortisol levels, your body also holds on to fat. And in addition to that, if you have any insulin resistance issues, your body is also holding on to fat. So realistically, by not eating enough, we're actually causing our body to hold on to more and more fat. And like we just talked about with that wine scenario, it starts to add up over time. So you might just see, a couple pounds here or there over a few months, but maybe 2-3 years, you've gained 20 or 30 pounds. And now what? Now your system's messed up and we have to go back and fix it, right? So it's really important to be able to approach it with knowing these things in advance to make sure that we're really smart about the way that we're approaching things and not getting ourselves stuck in that deficit. So the reasons that why underfueling doesn't work. Short term, low energy, persistent sugar cravings, poor workout recovery and muscle building, like we just talked about, hormonal disruption, disrupted sleep, increased fat retention as a survival mechanism. So none of that's good, right? But long-term risks, blood sugar roller coaster, aka your insulin resistance gets worse, and that often ends up leading to elevated triglycerides and A1C markers. If you don't know what that is, no big deal. Basically, it makes you less sensitive to insulin, makes your blood sugar worse, which can lead to diabetes ultimately. And one thing that's really interesting that I learned more recently is that you can actually have a few of your biomarkers get elevated like 10 to 13 years before your A1C ever gets elevated. So you could be developing diabetes over 2 decades, right? 10 to 20 years probably. And I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I did not eat the best, right? In high school, they used to feed us like fully loaded fries or nachos, or, I grew up in the 90s, we ate cereal and toast and orange juice for breakfast. Like that was a normal thing, right? And so each of us, even if we started to eat even if we started to eat better now, probably have a few years in our back pocket where we weren't eating the best, right? So we want to make sure that it's building up over time, whether it's good or bad, building up over time, that we realize that that's what makes the biggest difference, is what we're doing over the years, right? Not just what we've done the last couple of years. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not hope. That just means that we have a little bit more back-end work to do. So that's something that I wanted to make sure that I addressed as well. And then again, remembering that you cannot outrun, or in this case, out-cardio a bad diet. A lot of people turn to cardio as a solution for dropping weight, but we just saw it burns 5 to 10% of your calories. That is certainly not enough, right? So really, we want to get to the root of the issue by fixing our diet, which is what we'll talk about, and then also making sure that we are trying to build muscle, or at least sustainable tissue that is going to help us continue to burn calories as we're living and breathing, right? Because who doesn't want to work less and burn more? Oh, that's one more thing that I did say too. Cardio is for your heart, not the gut. Again, a lot of people turn to cardio when they're trying to lose fat. It is not an effective way long term. And you just basically end up withering away at the end. So muscle, 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 build some muscle, please. Cardio is great for your heart. Still do it for a different reason. All right, next piece that we're going to talk about is how we can stop guessing. So what am I eating? How much am I eating? Who knows, right? So a couple of common tools. I usually have most of my clients use MyFitnessPal. My Building University clients have more recently used Macros First. There's a couple of features that are similar and a couple of features that are different for each of them. So whatever you want to do doesn't really matter. The goal is just to build awareness, right? So some way for you to track calories, even if it's short term, to see what you're eating is going to be huge and instrumental in you being able to make those changes, right? And then there are some generic calorie estimators like the Mueller equation that you can use, or the MyFitnessPal equation is not too bad. And that's a good place to start, but realistically, there are better ways to do it. If you take real data like we do in Building University, it's much, much easier to be able to see what you're actually consuming. So for example, I have a couple clients who have been chronically dieting, and so even though they should probably be in like the 2,000-ish range, they were eating 12 to 1,300 calories consistently. So if we just assumed that the calculator was correct and used that 2,000 calorie number, they could have gained a lot of fat really quickly, and that would have been really, really bad. So that's why we look a little bit more in depth and just try to look at the actual data. And then, yeah, that's kind of what I described on the right side. So we make those adjustments based off of what they're actually eating instead of just using a generic equation. With that being said, the generic equation is a great start. So the goal is just to be able to figure out what you're eating and be more aware and make better choices, and whatever version of that you need to do in order to help yourself, awesome. Okay, and then the next piece is how this is going to show up in cheer and life. So as we talked about with the underfueling, low energy during practice or class, difficulty concentrating, and poor performance. Poor gut health would equal frequent bloating, digestive discomfort, sluggishness, and then the lack of structure coming from skipped meals, possibly due to irritability, brain fog, inconsistent energy levels throughout the day, and also how we talked about the sleep piece that is affected by what you eat. And then just making sure that you're properly fueling, having better performance, faster recovery between sets, and better focus in school work, and continuing to make continuous progress. So the last piece is our takeaway. Food is fuel, and fueling well does not just change your body. If we are fueling well, we're going to help with our mental focus and clarity, emotional stability and mood, daily energy levels, and most importantly, our long-term health outcomes. Remember that awareness is the first step to being able to make these adjustments. Thanks so much, and let me know if you have questions.